Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello and welcome to the program. Again, my name is Michael Anthony Ingram. My special guest is Ross Lane, poet and author Ross Lane. Ross is currently experiencing some difficulty signing on, but we'll be right back. We are back. Again, my name is Michael Anthony Ingram, and I'm here with Ross Lane. Let's bring Ross in. Hello, Ross. Can you hear me?
I can, Michael. How are you?
I'm quite well. And yourself?
Yeah, I've just had a bit of a frantic run around the house to find a device that will connect and so I can talk to you. But aside from that, all very calm and cool, mate.
Yes, fantastic. Well, we're together now. That's the most important thing. Yes, wonderful. Let's begin this journey together, okay?
Okay.
All right. What is poetry?
Start with an easy question.
Yes.
Poetry to me is probably one of the most subjective things that it is because it means different things to different people. For myself, I always assume poetry or believe poetry to be a meeting point. A nexus of emotional connection, if you like. It is different to everyone, like food and music and painting. But it's a unifying expression. It's a piece of text that can reach somebody else at their core, create an understanding and a meaning, and and something that can be beautiful, found in a common understanding. That's what it's always been to me.
All right, very nice, very nice. I like that. Why then, and this is a different slant on that first question, why is it important? What's the importance of it?
It's incredibly important because of its value, because it's something that many generations of humans have experimented with, have adapted to, have created. So there's a heritage aspect to it as well. But fundamentally, it goes back to one of my favorite books is Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is a book very much about that sort of search for the self. And I think if you're writing poetry, then you're actually doing that. In modern times, especially where we tend to deal with things like social media and very sort of transactional events and experiences, there's something wonderful that there's still an art form there that exists, and it exists in written form, it exists in books. There's lineage to it. There's historical context to it. But I think it's important because of that. It's the solidifying of a message that is not about posting online to get likes and shares or reaction. So it does stretch you. For the individual, for the writer, it's important because of that search for the self. It's good to have that uncomfortable feeling. One of my favorite writers is a Welsh songwriter called Mike Peters, and he wrote a song called Unsafe Building. I think there's probably no more apt a description of the writer than that, in that you're putting yourself into an area, especially as a published writer, where you're going to be reviewed and judged and your work discussed.
Yes.
And I think that's metal testing for an individual as well. So yeah, there's all sorts of important things around it. But for me, it's very much about that. It's about having that, that test of expression, and it's a beautiful way to express yourself. It's a very positive thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, let me ask this question. As you think about your body of work, what are some of the predominant themes?
My work, as we've looked at before, is very much separated into sections. They tend to form trilogies. There's no intention behind that. It just happens. But my themes often come down to that search for meaning and responsibility in life. And responsibility, I guess, is a hard and a difficult way to put it. But fundamentally what it is aligning the order, make sure there's order in the chaos of your life. And that can only be done through, soul searching and the acts of discovery, which, poetry lends itself to, quite magnificently. And identity is also a kind of a theme, and I wanted to tackle identity in a positive way. And when I write about identity, I'm not writing about, we have a skewed view on that now in modern times, but my search for identity is actually a search for who you are, not what you are, which I think are two very completely different things. Other things are, thoughts that I've had, people who are important in my life, travel, memories, all that very important stuff. And, there's a certain amount of documentation as well. Even though as a writer, you do tend to fabricate a bit, because obviously you don't want to write a biography of yourself, because that's not how it should work. But yeah, it's that those are the kind of the core pieces that I write, really. And as I said, I found them sort of quite fascinating things to take on, really, over the last 25 years.
All right. As you think about a poem, how does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image?
It's predominantly an idea. I credit a lot of my writing to my subconscious, because I think it does most of the work for me. Normally a poem for me can start at around 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, and I'll sit up in bed with an idea. Or I'll hear, one or two lines of a poem, and I let that kind of fester and settle, and I kind of I normally scribble it on my bedside table. And the imagery and the form of the poem, that's something that just comes much later. Ideas are, in the last book I wrote, Ideologue, that book was very much around the danger of ideas, and how we should deal with them and how we should explore them and examine them thoroughly before we sort of commit to them. Because they can, as wonderful as an idea is, it can be a dangerous thing as well. It can be the difference between dreams and capability. Going back to the old Icarus story there a little bit. But ideas have done tremendously good things in the world and tremendously bad things in the world, and I wouldn't want to be slave to it as a concept. And poetry lends itself to the exploration of that. Turning over those stones and looking in those difficult corners to find that nugget of truth. Ultimately, it is down to interpretation,
Yes.
But from my perspective, the connection as the writer is the connection between the sort of the writer and the page is significantly different to the connection between the reader and the page. Because the reader may not have, understand the writer's accent, and also the reader will have a different interpretation of what poetry is. And so that idea has to be kind of well thought out, because when it's written there and it's on page, it can't be edited on the computer. It's there on a page, and it's there for eternity. So, so those ideas need to be really thoroughly examined and you have to make sure that what you're expressing is a positive thing, or at least a constructive criticism of another idea.
Well, please share a poem.
I mentioned Mike Peters earlier, who's the Welsh singer-songwriter and the leader of the band The Alarm, who's one of my heroes. And I wrote a poem about him called The Man in the Camo Jacket. And it's about me just kind of being at one of his concerts, and he was there with his guitar, and I'm playing beautiful music. And so I went home and I wrote this. Reading stories from a sixth string, a hero stands before me, pulsing lifeblood with a jaw harp, and wrapping us in tales of his orchestral soul. We drink in the conversation. The troubadour shapes each delicious morsel, a pure swaddle on melodic swells, heart-born and essence-charged, waves that break upon our innermost force. His eyes cry out resolve and will, ascending to claim each triumphant refrain. The bard draws each shape's journey, carrying each one of us through the odyssey of his songs. Each rhetoric, woven and fashioned from a slice of his whole, memories of comfort, agony and vigor, the artist's heart laid bare in exposition, each shard a window to the full. And at last chord, at refrains close, the crowd renews his will to birth another, to place another rune before us, to punch our hearts with hymns new, and take us again on a journey through his conscience. The rhapsodist reaches down to strum again, the blues harp brings out in eerie harmony. Then, eyes closed looking for God, the canvas chant is unleashed, to drown us all in his joyous challenge spirit. I wrote that for Mike Peters after a concert that I went to, because it was incredibly moving, and I have nothing but respect and adoration for the man.
Yes, that was beautiful. Beautifully written. Thank you for sharing. You know, you talk about Mike Peters being an inspiration and influence. Are there others that are great writing influences for you?
There's loads. I mean, my writing influence started at a very young age. My father wrote poetry when I was very young.
Oh, very nice.
And the wonderful poems of you read them, they are little shards of early life. And so that was the start of it. But he was always, my father, very, very intelligent man. And whenever we would listen to music at home, we were talking about things like Neil Diamond, especially, was a massive inspiration for him and for me. And my father would always encourage me to listen to the lyrics. Listen to what the songwriter's saying. Don't just get caught up in the fancy chords and the sing-along choruses. What is the man saying? And so I started really focusing in on words at a very early age, and I owe that to my father more than anything else. Later on, when I went to my comprehensive school, high school, in the US, I was very lucky enough to be taught by a guy called Mark Jeffries, who, in my opinion, is the finest example of a teacher I've ever come across in my life. He was a guy that could really excavate the written words, and we started studying Seamus Heaney, the greatest poet that's ever lived. And Mark was able to really get me to understand Heaney and how Heaney wrote. And he's an incredibly charismatic teacher, filled the classroom with life. And this makes this world of literature so interesting and consuming. And just a fantastic man. I'm lucky enough to call him a friend now, all these years later. But he was a massive inspiration for me. And he brought that traditional English literature world alive for me. The combination of my father's writing enthusiasm, his enthusiasm for books, and then, getting into that world of, true literature then, and especially studying, as I said, Seamus, there's never been an equal, in my opinion. But again, like I said, poetry is subjective. It also came together. The first poem I ever wrote was in one of my classes, actually. Thankfully, the poem doesn't exist today because it's truly awful. I wrote it in a Welsh rugby club, and I never went back and I did it again quite so quickly. Always such ego and confidence. Mark gifted me, a whole world to understand and so on, and so really sort of get the macro out of it. As I said, that was built upon what my father taught me to understand and think and do at a young age. So those two are probably my two main drivers for that.
We have some problems in terms of our connection, and it could be due to the distance that we are apart from each other. I'm going to ask you to call back in, if that's okay, and we'll continue this journey when you call back in. Thank you, sir.
Okay. No problem, sir.
We'll be right back. We'll take a brief break, and we'll return. We are back. I am here with Ross Lane. Technology is wonderful when it's working. So hopefully it's working now. Hello, Ross.
Hi. How are you doing? I can hear you too.
Okay. Oh, great. Well, let's continue our journey together. Poetry is about emotions in many instances. Do you think that someone can be called a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
I don't think anybody should ever call themselves a poet, because it's up to you to decide if you're a poet or not. I think it can be a writer of poetry, but I don't think anyone should ever label themselves a poet. For me, no, I think emotion is the central driving force of any sort of poetic expression. I don't think you can do it without your heart and soul being in it. It's to write a poem and to really write something with catharsis about yourself is an incredibly emotional journey to go on. And sometimes you may go to a dark place with that. I mean, personally, I've been known to carry darker moods for days and days while I'm working through a specific piece of work. Likewise, happy moods as well. But I've been, I've talked about my parents earlier. I've been quite lucky in that I grew up in a very emotional house where emotions were expressed very freely and very positively. And so I've never had a fear of being seen as an emotional person, because I think emotions are a massive part of who you are.
You're very... Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I'm just basically going to summarize it. But yeah, so no, I don't think you can be a poet, as you asked, without having a very deep vein of emotion running through you. All
right. You're a very prolific author. Prolific, extremely prolific.
It's 25 years worth. It's a lot of the earlier books were written a long time ago. And it's time to find a publisher. Quite interesting to see, as a writer, to see your writing style change so much. And looking back now, and to some of the early works that I did, that really started on, because when I started studying poetry, I wanted to write poetry, but everything I wrote was just terrible. And that's because I overly concerned myself with things like structure and how many syllables per line, and have I used assonance there, and have I used alliteration there, and all these forms, which are wonderful tools for a poet, can really strangle an idea sometimes.
Yes.
Which is why I tend to ignore them as much as I can. Is if you strangle a thought with a meter, then you choke how far that thought has to travel. Well, I don't think that's a positive thing to do. So I was taught by a lady called Sheena Pugh, an incredible British poet, and she gave me a single piece of advice which I stick to, which is just write as much as you can on a page, and then go back and start crossing out words. And when the only words you have left are the ones that you can't do without, that's when you have the kernel of your poem, and you work from there. And that works incredibly well for me.
Does writing energize or exhaust you?
Both. More exhausting than energizing. But it's scales of just the exhaustion and is worth it, because ultimately you're creating something, and there's it's a gift to be able to create something and share it with people. Not that I'm saying that what I have is a gift. What I'm saying is it's a blessing to be able to create those connections through things that you write.
Please share a poem.
Well, I mentioned my first poem, which was about a place in Scotland called Glenfinnan, and I struggled for months and months and months writing not very good things. And I sat there one night with a glass of Highlands Scotch and a cigar, on a jetty near Loch Shiel in the Highlands, and I started writing about the place I was in. And it's probably my first real poem. It was the first poem I ever had published.
All right.
But it's just called Glenfinnan. Hills and clouds frame blue skin. Cobalt mountains catch snow in crowns. Rocky edges hold back pouring green in the place where silence grows. The river rests on gentle current, its rippled edges smearing stones to glass, as it moves up the waiting loch, splitting around the viaduct's legs. A stone circle protects the clan, their dead names now carved on walls, and the Highlander, immortalized and cast in stone, looks down protecting ancient souls. At night, the mountains paint the sky in their image, and the black-skinned stills blow purple and blue. The river rolls on gentle current, while the glen slips away from time to rest. And that was the first time that I'd sort of written something, and it actually felt like a poem to me. And I've written about the Highlands quite sort of extensively, quite a lot. I find it a very inspirational place. But as I said, that was the first time I thought, yes, that's a poem.
Did you feel validated once you found out that your poem had been accepted, or writing is just, it's important to write regardless of whether you accept it for publication or not?
I'd say it's important to do it regardless. I mean, I was lucky to find Wordcatcher and talk to David there and begin a publication journey. But even if that hadn't happened, I would still be writing. How I would share them, I don't know. I mean, we live in a different world now with the internet and all these wonderful tools that we have at our disposal. But I would still do it. I would still do it purely because, you know, it's a wonderful thing to do, and it's a great, let's call it a hobby for want of a better phrase. But you know, it's a very enjoyable thing to do, but it can be incredibly frustrating at times as well. But it's a very enjoyable thing to do.
So please share another. I want to hear more of your work. Please share another.
Okay. I spoke about my father, and I wrote a poem remembering my father working in the garden when I was younger, and I called the poem "The Barrow," which hopefully will come to light as I go through it. But this is the barrow, and this is from my father. In memory, the old man borrowed time, passing beneath my window, always with a hearable huff. Looking down, I watched his sweating head, remember his autumn turning winter to the tick of the barrow wheel. I watched him gulp down mugs, refilling his frame's rind to leak again, setting to nature's mural with his biting spade, carving seams for window panes to put on view, changing the act old matte portraits held dear. His blue coat, always zipped and closed, arm-ended with paint-dashed gloves, and his back vaulted like a bony dome above the shovel stem, portioning off old roots to raise the new from dead slim's furrows. He lifts the handle high again, the blade's flat gleams in watching sun, and sets the clay, taking hospital corners, cuts lined with licorice seams, the slices of his blade cutting long lost roots, buried like old spine husks. The only halt, a ring or bell chime from dirt-choked rocks, who chain and clang against the spade's flint splay flat. But he clears it to the barrow all the same, stopping to mop his now drenched brow, and then back to it, chasing new growth on nature's shabby altar. And that's the memory of a young child and watching his father work around the house.
Mm-hmm.
So an important thing again to document.
Yes, I agree 100%. It's important to document your feelings and your thoughts. Very, 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 very important. Some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it, while others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. What is your take on it?
You've got they are living, breathing entities, and I think that especially in modern times now, where you can be hunted down and burned at the stake for something you did 20 years ago. It's an interesting kind of place for writers to be. For me, it's a living, breathing thing, and if it's honest, which it always should be, and if you were comfortable enough to publish it at the time, then you stand by it. Looking back now over the 10 books that I've written, there's nothing in them that I don't stand by today, and but also, interpretation is a powerful thing. And one of the things I always kind of say is you should never really assume that you understand what the poet means, or the poetry writer means, because it's your interpretation. Your relationship with the words are completely different to the writer's interpretation of the words. So you should never make an assumption about that. I mean, it's like I was speaking to somebody once, and they said, I read this poem, I didn't like it. And I said, well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. You didn't like it because you reacted to it. And you don't assume that the writer wanted you to enjoy that particular poem, because it may be written and constructed in a way that is challenging and is deliberately trying to upset and dislodge. I wrote one many years ago about the boogeyman, and my fiancée Natalie that struggles to read it now because she finds it uncomfortable to read it, and I thought that's kind of the point. Likewise, I love sort of the world, and I've always been a lover of sharks as an animal, and fascinated by them. Read hundreds of books about them. And, now and again I've written pieces about shark finning because I find it disgusting and abhorrent. And it's like, and they are hard to read because they're challenging and graphic. But they should be, because that's the point, is to, for you to be as impacted by what I'm seeing and how I feel as I want you to be. So, yeah, they should live, they should breathe, they should evolve. And, but the great ones stand the test of time. And and that's why, whether we would see another Seamus Heaney in the next 1,000 years, probably not. Will we see another Dylan Thomas in the next 1,000 years? Probably not. But that's why they are heralded the way they are, because what the content and their thoughts and the art they produce stands the test of time and lives and breathes today.
For a moment, I'd like us to look at a poem like it's a cake. All right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you feel are some of the most prevalent ingredients that go into the makeup of this cake, i.e. poem?
Well, cake. I'm a big fan of cake.
All right. All right.
What would I say? I think that the thought, why I tend to write in what they call stream of consciousness.
Yes.
Is that I think that vein, that lovely filling then, has to run through the entire piece. And it's whether it's a landscape poem or whether it's a poem about a patriotic poem or a love poem, if you can write those, that thought and that emotional core has to run through the whole piece. The other sort of ingredients then are the sounds that the poem can make. I'm a big fan of creating. If I write about a beach, I want lots of S sounds in it to create that sort of so you get that feeling that you're there. But it's that thought. It has to have that spine, and whether that's the lovely cream filling or not, I'm not sure. The sponge is decorative most of the time, and icing can be decorative. And you can use fancy words, and you can use fancy poetry techniques. But it's heart, it's its core, and it's its spine. It's that lovely filling. It's that lovely juicy bit in the middle that you drag out. That's the important bit. And you're making me hungry now, Michael.
You're making me hungry. Thank you. All right. Please share another poem for us, sir.
Well, I spoke earlier about sort of patriotic sort of things, and I've written about Wales a great deal over the last 25 years, but I found that I was writing about sections of Welsh society, and not about the country itself. So about a year or so back, I wrote a poem which I called Wales, where I wanted to describe the land and its people, and this is what I came up with. There is a land whose veins are silent dark, sown beneath its mountain earth, like the aching threads of stillness, only humming out in history's hark, to older times and struggled times, tales of men and woe in shafts below, the coffers who sang out psalms from dusty lungs with poppy-stained palms. There are winds who've never heard its tongue, forgotten now or missing and spoken of in myths for years. A people sound much older than the verdant ground, a call to arms for some in pain, the icon of forgotten selves, nourished now in tears to grow and thrive again. Yet the land still stands so proud and strong, and behind our rugged days, tales of struggle woven to haunted songs, the wearing breaking of the English yoke, the tide, the rising, the Chartists and Rebecca's ghosts. From ancient wars we've ached for destiny's sun, long back before the Blue Book came to crush our tongues. But we still stand as people, bards and patriots all, determined Cymru, land of my fathers, land of songs. And that was my way of describing the country where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's struggles and it's long sort of history, and it was important to kind of to write that down and say it from that perspective of the challenges the language has had in the past, and and invaders and things like that. But it's a wonderful musical green, lush place I live. I'm very blessed to be a Welshman.
Oh, very nice. I like that, because that was going to be my next question to you. How has growing up, living in Wales, affected your writing?
Well, the Welsh people are a highly emotional people in general. You very rarely find a Welsh person who kind of likes something. They either tend to love it or hate it. And if they hate it, they'll never talk to it again for the rest of its life. And if they love it, they'll talk about nothing but it all, for the rest of its life. And I said, my family a great example of that. So we have this natural sort of passion, and our hearts are full, and like America, we have this wonderful national anthem that brings you to tears when you sing it, and we have a language and a culture and a rich history of our own, which connects us back to the wider Celtic tribes in the UK. So I think it's hard not to be passionate and be Welsh. I think they kind of go together, and I mentioned my father earlier, but my mother was also a great influence on my writing, because my mother is a highly emotional, passionate person. At times I refer to her as an emotional tsunami, because she sort of, she loves all consumingly, and and that's one of the wonderful things about her. But yeah, we're very proud, and we're 6.5 million of us, and so it's quite unique to be a Welshman or a Welsh person. And
all right,
yeah,
it's very nice, very nice. I like that. That put a smile on my face. It's very nice, very nice. They say, Ross, that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, artists, and poets. What do you think emerges naturally from your work? And you've had 25 years to write. So what has emerged from your work, or from you?
I think that honesty with the self, that's definitely emerged. I think, I think we can very easily take the elephant in the room and brush it under the rug sometimes, and ignore the big lump in the rug, and kind of get on with our lives. We don't. There's things that we need to face up to, because one of the reasons I did the first 3 books, which were about that sort of formation of the self, and the reason I called the first book Anthology. Traditionally an anthology is a book written by lots of different authors, but because the book was written over 25 years, I was a very different person at the writing of a lot of those pieces. So it did feel like different authors to me at the time. And I think it's very hard. I think it's very hard sometimes to face into the fact that, we've all been different people. At most junctions of our life, we change. We're changed by society. We're changed by life events to ourselves. And it's fine to kind of, be the person you are today, but don't forget the people that you were yesterday as well.
Yes.
So holding up that honest mirror to yourself is a very truthful thing to do. But you need to do it if you want to find the meaning in yourself. And you have to look at that mirror, no matter what that mirror shows. And so yeah, I think we're blessed with great comedians. The Welsh comedian Rod Gilbert is exceptional. Ricky Gervais is probably my favorite comedian on the planet right now, if you want to talk about honesty and brutal honesty as such. So yeah, I think it's a good place to be. It's good company to be in, comedians and poets, because we are honest, but we're only ever honest with our feelings. And there's a big difference between facts and feelings. So I can be honest about how I feel, but I'm not writing a historical document here, so it's not necessarily going to be riddled with facts either.
Yes.
It's purely how I feel about something. And we were talking earlier about ideas and how dangerous they are, and feelings. Feelings have destroyed countries and burned cities. Or feelings have written the greatest love poems and love songs, and the greatest pieces of art that the world has seen, whether it's Van Gogh or Brett Whiteley and people like that. So it's an incredible kind of collection of things. But the honesty is there in the mirror, and you have to take that on, I think, to to find your meaning, which will then make you happy.
Yes.
That's just how it should work, I think.
Wow, very nice. You really believe in the importance of meaning making, it sounds like. Meaning making in terms of who we are. Tell me about that. I want to dig a little deeper. Tell me about that.
I've lived a very sort of, I would say, a kind of interesting life. I've been lucky enough to be a musician and a short film writer, a script writer, and now a writer of poetry. I've lived overseas. I lived in Australia for nearly 10 years. And I've come back to Wales. And it's very easy, I think, to, having gone through serious emotional events in life, your meaning, finding your meaning to me is that anchor to your boat in the harbor. And if your anchor isn't strong, then your boat's going to get capsized in waves or storms. So to be the best person you can be for yourself and for all the people around you, you have to understand what your meaning is, and your meaning comes from how you live your life, your moral compass, and the responsibilities that you take on in life. And they're kind of important things. Poetry is a great avenue to that, because it does let you do that exploration. It does allow you to be self-indulgent a bit more, because you have the option to leave piles of poetry on the floor, which is what I tend to do. So I think, well, that's not going out anywhere. But that meaning is, we see, I stopped watching mainstream media probably about a year ago.
Okay.
Because I just find it's so sensationalist, and it's depressing to watch. And we've been through a very difficult time as a planet with the recent outbreak. And I just found it hard to kind of watch it and just hearing, these 24/7 news channels just beating you over the head with it. And it's kind of like, and I get it, it's a global thing, but your meaning means that you set your house in order, and you do the best by your house and your family and your friends. And I think if everybody in the world could find their meaning to do the best by themselves and their family and their friends, and everyone did that in their own homes, then the world would be fine. And the world would be a dramatically better place. So, it's that sphere of influence. It's what can I fix and what can I help, and understanding that. It's not about, having no concern about wider global issues, but it's about looking at them from a place of, from a solid place of perspective. And finding your meaning gives you that.
So what do you think is the role of a poet in modern day society?
The role of a poet in modern society is to write something that somebody enjoys, to make sure that emotional olive branch reaches someone. But ultimately, as I said earlier, the relationship as the writer is between myself and the page.
Okay.
But I think we can positively influence, and I hate that word influence, because I'm not an influencer, because I don't like that at all. But if I can write something that somebody enjoys, and if I can write something that is meaningful to somebody else, or make somebody else think about something, then then that's my role. And I don't see any bigger or larger than that. I don't think my role is to change the world or save the world. I think my role is to write, to entertain, and to maybe spark a thought process or two. That's it.
Okay. Well, please share 2 poems this time. Thank you, sir.
2 poems.
Yes.
Well, I mentioned my mother earlier, and this is one of my favorite poems I wrote about her cooking in the kitchen in Camar, where she lives. So this poem is called Home at Home. I will take you there to feel the heat of my mother's stove, where her spitting, rabid, gargling pots froth and hiss, chopped with potatoes. until she trickles the hazy water into browning pan with meat juices and flour to stir, shake, and shiver into perfect toothsome umber gravy. We all hang like a gallery, hidden from outside by cloudy, dewy windows, noses full of the alluring scents, gorging on anticipation as a starter until our quarry's served, and then to fill ourselves to brim. Sometimes it's just Mam and I, and so we drift to music, wrap ourselves in philharmonic waves, or grab and clutch at the music's lyrics there, finding life's mirror in exquisite words as we try and weigh them, holding back the joyful deep laments born in the harmonies that shine into the kitchen's frame from the pulsing grill cloth cartons. And, that's a sort of a scene from home where, my mother's cooking and we listen to music and and we listen to the lyrics and we do all those kind of wonderful things that, that the families do in the home. I mean, speaking of sort of artwork, I have a poem here that I wrote about Vincent van Gogh, which is called Vincent, because I think his work is beautiful and moves me and inspires me. So I'll read that one. Those magnificent churns of pain, the whirls as you whirl, an imperfect world laid out in perfect cambered impasto. On the board, you caught the tides of the sky, framed wind in open leaning lands, and captured sun's chill in starlight shadows. What is it they could not see? The careless and obtuse, gazing out towards their nose tips in perfect florin visage. On walls, the flowers boil in bouillabaisse, crooked trees birth from amber paths, and wheat blades shift beneath shrouding crows. There are fables in the hue, with souls gleaming, shadows gifted to the watching deaf, walking below your perfect heaven tarns. Yet I cannot pass your starry night, because my soul drifts free and unshackled on the gleams within your contours. I can feel you lift me to your stars, and I can hear you there. And that poem's called Vincent.
Your work is so powerful, Ross.
Thank you very much.
It really, really is. How has your idea of what poetry is and what it can do changed since you began writing poetry?
I don't think it has changed.
Okay.
I think I think I've always seen it as an artwork. I still see it as an artwork. I still read a lot of poetry because I believe in it as an artwork, and I enjoy it. And I think it's probably the enjoyment that I get from reading it that I want somebody to have when reading what I've written. So my idea and concepts of it haven't changed. I didn't realize initially how challenging it would be to be a published author, to go through that process of feeling that that work is out there, and the publication process is odd because you kind of create something and it's kind of like a child, and then when it goes to a publisher, it's kind of like giving your child to somebody else. Yes,
I agree.
So I wasn't fully prepared for that. So that I found that challenging. But it's nice to go back through some of the books now and read some of the older pieces and go, well, yeah, I wrote that and it means something. And the feedback that I've had, positive and negative, which you have to expect when you're doing this, is a great experience because as I said, it's just as important to move somebody enough to tell you that they don't like what you're doing as it is to move them to tell you that they do.
Yes.
So any reaction is a good reaction.
Now, do you belong to a writing group or a community?
No, I don't. I have my own Facebook page, and where I put any sort of information on books, and I also create sort of videos to go with readings of my poetry that I share on YouTube. But I'm not part of any wider sort of writing group. I have friends, that are writers. Arthur Cole, who I know is a good friend of mine.
Yes.
And we do podcasts together, and we're both very different writers. So it's always good to have a podcast with him and have very different perspective on things. And also Nigel Williams, who's and Russ Garrity, who are fiction writers here in Wales, and he's a good friend of mine as well. So it's good to share like that with a writing community. But as far as groups are concerned, no, I'm not a member of anything.
You're a seasoned writer. You know this.
I'm great.
What advice would you give to an aspiring writer, an aspiring poet?
Write and write and write and write.
Tell me more.
Just don't think you're going to get it right first time, because you won't. Be ready for someone not to like it. Don't, just because your parents and your friends tell you it's good doesn't mean that it is. But write about yourself. Start by writing about yourself, because writing a poem is about understanding something, and understanding yourself is that strong spine and vein that should go through your work, and set what you're about. But as I said, the advice from Sheena: fill up the page, cross out words, and whatever you have left with, that's what you should do. Whenever I talk to younger people about writing, then I always sort of give them a little challenge, and I tell them to think of something, and then when they've thought of it, I said, now write down what it looks like, then write down what it smells like, then write down what it tastes like, then write down what it feels like. And once you have that, you kind of have the basis of a poem, because you're hitting all those sort of descriptive sort of elements. But my advice is, honestly, just write and express yourself, and never compare yourself to another writer, because that's unfair on you. And don't worry about your style. Don't worry because you're not writing in a traditional or standardized style. Just express yourself. And don't. My other piece of advice is, don't overly tinker with it. Maybe go back through it 3 or 4 times, but walk away from it, because ultimately, there's poems I have in books that if I wrote them now, I'd go back and change them. So at some point, you have to put the baby to bed, and you need to be prepared to do that.
Who are you as a result of being a poet?
I'm probably more thoughtful than I used to be because of it.
Okay.
I'm probably more expressive than I used to be because of it. But fundamentally, I think I'm still at times, one of the things about writing about your past is that, if you get it right, like with the poem The Barrow, it takes you back to that feeling of being that young kid watching his father work, or, watching your mother cook in the kitchen. But I don't think it's changed me.
Okay.
It's just maybe chiseled off some of the rough edges. Let's put it that way.
Okay. We have time for one more piece.
One more piece. Well, I'll give you a love poem to finish. And,
I love that. Very nice.
Yeah. So this poem is called Fishing Heart, a willow tree that's by a pond, and it's a teenage girl to have a kiss on a cuddle. Okay. Even our shadows held hands along the winding path of the fishing heart, skirting the silver canal rib, a chalk powdered path, stacking left before the old tired bridge. Over the fence and through the coppice, tearing sleeves and jeans and the raspy thorny wings of your curators, then on through soggy greens in mud baths to where the fishing hop waits. To hear its old bent back, wind mid-bow, as it reached into the mill pond, teetering on the paddle's edge, its black bow screaming at the aimless turf in falling out. At half top, it rested its face in gentle billow mirror, the leaves dancing in meek breakers, while the vines strung softly to water down the board, fluttering music to us. We sat on a trunk to watch it, a fallen, fixed and land-abandoned chunk, long drowned in fantail pond, above the flap of sap-trapping waves who petrify you in death. Among button-midgy clouds of dusk, the winter sun fails like a cheating lamp. Its last fleck glints on green-topped birds, waterfowls mid-pincer, carving furrows near the fishing heart. Sitting, we joined our hands just near the fishing heart, swamped in gentle sounds. Our eyes then made parley, and from there it's all a little fuzzy. I'm sure it's a love poem, please.
Do you think that you were meant to be a poet?
Possibly. And probably not a full process I've been through. I think it would be I'd be unfulfilled if I wasn't a writer. I think it was something that I needed to do, and so I get a great deal of fulfillment, satisfaction, and meaning from writing. Whether I'm meant to do it or not, I don't know.
Okay.
But it just happened who brought me to it.
All right. What's next for you creatively?
I've written 2 more books. One about the Island of Cephalonia, where quiet and peaceful place to be alone with your thoughts. And I've written a book called Journeyman, which is the wonderfulness, ordinariness. And it's talked about how you don't need to be, you don't need to be the world's best at anything. Sometimes competency is what the world needs. But those are the next 2 that are with my publisher at the moment, and hopefully will come out now within the next 12 months. And I'll probably continue to write. I think opportunities to write in weird sort of situations. The last poem I wrote in a barber's, a chain of barbers. Looking at what I'll go to the same hairdresser that I did when I was a kid, and the guy that ever cut my hair is working, and I sat there and I was sort of having my hair cut and watching him in the mirror, and I wrote a poem, and I was planning to take a bit of time out from it, but it just sort of came, and that's kind of the interesting thing about it. It came quite intrusive on you, but we keep writing as the idea comes. We keep writing.
You are an incredible poet, and I'd like to thank you for being my guest. I've enjoyed listening to your work.
Well, I've enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for being so patient of going through my technical issues earlier.
All right, sir. Well, to you, I say thank you. To our listening audience, I say thank you as well. And as I share every time we're together, let poetry ring. Please take care of yourselves. Until next time, take care.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.